Okay, Kaplan, we're gonna do 61 to 80 right now. How do you solve a quadratic equation? Well, there's many ways that you learn. Something like this is factorable. So some of them are simply factorable, so x would be 2 or -2, that's one way. If it's missing a middle term, for example, something like this, take the square root of both sides, and you get plus or minus 3. You can use the quadratic formula. You can complete the square. You guys remember how to complete the square?
You divide it by 2 this way.
If you had something like this,
2 squared.
see, this is not factorable. Sometimes there's a number here, you have to divide by that number, but I'm just trying to make this go quick. Add 9. Half of this squared, add 4 to both sides, factor, square root, and then add 2. And the last thing, anyone know the last way to solve a quadratic function? Da-da-da. This is going to be your best way. This is going to be the easiest thing you do. So hit graph, and I'm going to do a new document. Okay, so add graph. So make up something. Let's make up a quadratic equation, anything.
X squared minus the log root of
What are you saying?
nothing.
3, let's just make one up. 3x squared minus 2x, we don't feel like solving this, minus 1. And then hit graph. There it is. So now, how do you find out the zeros? Here's one answer, and here's another answer. Well, if you look at the multiple choice answers, I'm going to say one of the answers should be between 0 and -1, and the other one's going to be between 0 and 1. Might be 1. I'm not sure. So how can you be exact? If you need to be exact, you hit menu, right here, hit menu, and then go to analyze graph. And then you're going to go to the hit 0, because you're looking for the zeros. Now, get your little hand right by that, as close to that, click on it,
It's
and
oblivious.
you wanna arrow over, it's gonna shade it, and as soon as it, oops, I'm sorry, you guys. You guys didn't see what I did. Did you see it? Didn't
Yeah.
realize that. So I'll do it again. That's the 0, it's -0.33, which is -1/3. So let's say I wanna find that 0 right there. I'm gonna hit menu, analyze graph, 0. So get your little arrow over close to that, click on it, in the middle, and then arrow over, it'll shade it in, and then as soon as it pops up, it'll say 0, and there it is, 1, 0. So if you forgot the quadratic, any of these things, that's what you should do. Number 62, what is the Pythagorean theorem? We've
A
done
squared
so
plus
much
B
of it
squared
this
plus
week.
C squared.
It's the 2 legs squared, or a squared plus b squared equals c squared. How do you add or subtract fractions?
Get a common denominator.
You gotta get a common denominator, right? But what if you have one of these fancy calculators in front of you?
Plug it in.
Yep. Do you remember how I told you to do it? You hit this little button right here, which is your fraction button. And let's say I want to add 1/3 plus, or you can subtract, and then make up another fraction. Let's do 3/5. Well, the common denominator is you gotta get a common denominator, and it's 15, so the answer would be 14/15. What if I wanna convert this answer to a decimal? Let's say they give you an answer in decimal
That's
form.
menu.
Hit menu, number, and then you can convert to convert to decimal. Oops, menu, number, whoops. Convert to decimal and then hit enter. There it is. Control, enter. Okay, how do you simplify fractions to lowest terms? Well, the calculator will do it for you, or you can get factors of both the numerator and denominator. So for example, let's say I have the fraction 12/18. If you type it in like that, your calculator will simplify it for you. How's that? You just hit enter and it'll do it. Do you know what the remainder is? It's the whole number that's left after you divide. Number 66, how do you know if an integer is a multiple of 5 or 10? Well, for 5, it ends in a 5 or a 0. For 10, it has to end in a 0. How about 2 or 4? How do you know a number is divisible by 2? What's the deal for that one? If the last digit is even, it's divisible by 2. Do you know what the rule is for 4? Anyone know what 4 is?
Every other.
So if I gave you this number, if the last 2 digits is divisible by 4, does 4 go into 24? It does 6 times, then this whole number is divisible by 4. So you look at the last 2 digits for 4. How do you know if the sum, if I asked you to add 2, like if I said an odd plus an odd number, an odd plus an even, an odd minus an even, how about an odd times an odd, any of these. Do an example. So for example, what is an odd plus an odd? If I took 2 odd numbers and added them together, what do you get? You get an even. So it's even. What's an odd and an even? So 5 plus, let's do 4. What do you get? So that would be odd. And so forth. Okay? How do you find the least common multiple and greatest common factor of 2 or more numbers? I would use my calculator. You're going to hit menu, number, and here is number 4 is least common multiple. So if you hit 4, go to least common multiple. Let's say I want the least common multiple of 3 and 4. Anyone know what it is off the top of their head? 12. There it is. What if I wanted the greatest common factor? Hit menu, actions, and greatest common divisor is greatest common factor. So let's do 12 and 18, and you get 6. We're going to do 10 more.
Can you zoom out?
Zoom out. Yes, I can. Okay, what does relatively prime mean? Give me an example of a prime number.
13.
13 is prime. 5, 7, those are all prime numbers. Is 8 prime?
No.
No. Is 9 prime?
No.
Those are relatively prime numbers. Do you know what that means?
No.
That if you put them together, there's nothing common other than a 1. They're called relatively prime. So 8 and 9, they're not prime numbers, but they're relatively prime to each other. The only number that's common to both of those is the number 1. That's what relatively prime means. What does prime factorization mean?
It's like when you have a number and then you break it down, it's not like 36 would be like
Yep.
2, 3, 2, 3.
So if I asked you to prime factor 36, what would you do?
Break it down to 6 and 6, 2, 3, 2, 3.
So these are the prime factors, so that would be, it would be 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. Okay, what is the difference between a factor and a multiple? Well, a factor, like if I said, what are the factors of 6? It'd be 2 and 3. What numbers multiply to give you 6? If they are asking you for multiples of 6, 6, 12, 18, 24, 36, and so on. Those are multiples. Okay, the next two are probably new to you guys. Intersection and union. Intersection. So if I give you set A is the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. And set B is equal to 3, 4, 5, and 6. If I wanted the intersection of these two, one way to write intersection is like that. It's this N. That's intersection. The other way, which they do a plus sign. These mean intersection. Where do these two sets intersect?
3, 4.
3 and 4. That would be the answer. If I asked you what the union is, they might write it like this, union, or I've seen it like this. That's union. Both of these are union. The union of these would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What do these remind you of with like inequalities? This would be an and, this would be an or. That's how I remember it, and an or. How do you count consecutive integers? Do you know what that even means? How do you count consecutive integers? So if I said, how many integers are there between 13 and 31? Do you know how to do that? Are you going to sit there and say 13, 14, 15, 16, 17? What are you going to do? What's the fastest way to find out how many integers are between here? You do 31 minus 13. Is that the answer? Nope, you have to add 1 to that. It's 19. So the rule is to do this. You subtract those two numbers and add 1. That's how many integers there are between 13 and 31. The difference plus 1. Okay. How do you multiply and divide positive and negative numbers? Well, you learn a positive times a positive is a positive. What's a positive times a negative? Negative. What's a negative times a negative?
If it's an even number of negatives.
And there you go. Thank you, Nick. If you count the number of negatives, if it's odd, it's negative. If it's even and you're multiplying or dividing, it's even is positive. What does, when you see this PEMDAS, what does that tell you?
Parentheses.
Order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. You do what's in parentheses first, then you do exponents, you multiply and divide, add and subtract. How do you add a positive to a negative number? Well, you subtract them and you take the sign, the positive or negative of the bigger of the two. Or use your calculator. And the last question that we're going to do today is, what is the definition? What is it, when they talk about an irrational number, what kind of number is that? It's a number that doesn't repeat, it doesn't end, it goes on and on and on. For example, pi, e, square root of 2, square root of 3, square root of 5, square root of 7. They're non-repeating, non-terminating decimals. Why do you need to know that? Because if they ask you a question and tell you that the answers are, they only want irrational or rational, you got to know what set that you're playing around with for that question. So for homework tonight, the rest of the time, you're going to do